Let's go to Cape Coral, Florida. We'll start in Cape Coral, Florida today, where Todd is listening on Catholic Answers, or excuse me, Catholic.com. Welcome, Todd. We're really grateful that you called, and we're asking, why aren't you Christian? So why aren't you Christian, Todd?
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
And I guess for whatever background is necessary on this or helpful on this is, religion wasn't necessarily discussed a whole lot in the house where I was growing up.
Okay.
So that just, starting point there. And, grew up, became an adult, never really gave any thought to it. I have, in one form or another, had kind of health issues pretty well all my life. And, the phrase I've used before is you can't exactly call God the divine physician and not expect somebody to come knocking for just that.
Right.
I know that's not the reason you're supposed to look, but that's what started me.
Sure.
And so start looking into religion and, hear a lot of talk about, relationship with God and relationship with Jesus. And that's obviously a very large component of things.
Right.
But when I hear, more specifics as to what that relationship is, it's like, okay, hang on. Sacraments, confession, Eucharist, all this stuff that is all
right.
100% contingent, as far as I can tell, on pre-existing faith, which I would not feel in any way comfortable saying that I have.
Right.
So it's kind of like, okay, hang on.
Yeah.
For the thing that's going to say that there is a God that loves me personally and wants to have some sort of personal relationship with me, I have to assume a thing that I cannot make myself think.
Very good.
For that to happen, and then if somehow I'm able to do that, or I suppose the Catholic or Christian position would be that God enables me to do that, because my understanding is faith is a gift from God. Forgive me if I'm wrong on that, but
oh no, it is.
And so it's like, okay, it's kind of that gap of everyone talks relationship.
Yeah.
I do not see anything that
Gotcha.
I would be comfortable saying, oh, that's a relationship.
Right. Gotcha. Well, let me jump in, Todd. Yeah, I mean, you've raised a number of really, I think, important things. In fact, you remind me of my teen years. Just so you know, Todd, I had a very rebellious, really beginning in my early teens, and called myself an atheist. And I can remember ridiculing my because he always maintained his faith in God, and I used to laugh at it. So you need a crutch or whatever. I'm not buying this stuff. But one thing that really helped me, Todd, was in those teen years, I did start delving in. I was always interested because I was raised in a home where my father and my mother did have faith. My father was a Southern Methodist. My mother was a Baptist, and she took us to the Baptist church, and I accepted Jesus when I was 10. I rejected it when I was 12. I didn't last very long, Todd. I didn't last that long. But I did always maintain a sort of intrigue. So I did start reading, and I actually had a history teacher that, in my actually junior high years, who got me interested in reading. And so I did. I read a little bit about, who is this Buddha guy, and, what is Hinduism, and a little bit of Islam and that sort of thing. And I have to say, I always maintained intellectually, there is something about this Jesus guy. But I didn't believe. And so years later, that would come back, Todd. And I read a book not long ago by a fellow named Dr. Anthony Flew. And he was probably the most famous intellectual atheist of the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. He was a fascinating man. And he wrote a book, There Is a God. And it's a fascinating book because he was an atheist. And in that book, he chronicles how he journeyed toward and then accepted the reality of God. When we come back from the break, Todd, I want to just share with you a few things. He kind of was me on steroids because I was just dabbling as a kid. But I want to share with you how he was kind of me on steroids after
this. When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples, now all the lines are full.
Yeah.
So okay, that's good. This is a wonderful call. I'm so glad that Todd called.
Yes, amen.
And we're John's working his way through the other calls. I think it'll be slow, but that's okay because you're going to need a little time talking. Do you want?
And there's more. Than this.
Oh, there's 5 more calls.
Oh man, see, that's the problem with this is
by the time you get
call,
them, because you really got to convince
Yeah.
people who have never, they're not Christians. They're probably accidentally listening to our show. Yeah. I'll tell you what though, everybody who calls, well, let's give them some kind of book, like maybe Answering Atheism. Just give something away that's ours.
Yeah.
It's got to be one of our books though. It can't be.
Yeah, or Why We're Catholic.
Okay. Yeah.
Trent does such a good job. It's, Why We're Catholic, or
because there's a lot of people that want to talk to you. So I would say give them a good answer and then say, we'll send you a book.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, let's send him Answering Atheism.
Okay, I'll put that on there.
Yeah.
One way or another, everybody's going to get a Trent book.
Yeah.
At some point today. But the next person's agnostic, but would like to be a Christian, and I knew there was going to be somebody that's in the struggle.
I'm gonna encourage him to get that book.
Anthony Flu's book.
There Is a God.
Yeah.
By Dr. Anthony Flew. And he never became a Christian.
No, I know, but he was coming.
He struggled with the immortality of the soul of all things. That was what kept him. He said if it wasn't for that, he would have been a Christian.
It's not wild. It's not wild, but he's such an analytic thinker. He needed to probably had 10 more steps to work through, and then he would have got there.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Tim Staples is our guest, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, author of Behold Your Mother, a biblical and historical defense of the Marian doctrines. And Tim actually told us, and we agreed with him, it's a lot of fun when we take the time to talk to non-Christians.
Yes.
And so you volunteered for this task.
I did.
And we were happy to take you up on it. And now we've got a whole bunch of people on the line.
Yeah.
And I think in fairness, it took a little while to convince folks, maybe because they're not Christians, they're calling it a Christian radio show. So that's fair, but we'll try to get to everybody. Back to Todd in Cape Coral, Florida.
Yeah. So Todd, just to pick up where we left off, when I read Flu's book, he reminded of me in my teen years, but of course he was an intellectual giant. And so I recommend the book highly to you. Check it out. There Is a God. And a little history to that title. Way back in the 1940s, he wrote a book. I think it began as an article and became a book, There Is No God. And that was his atheistic presentation on why there is no God. And so all those years later, like 60 plus years later, he wrote the book, There Is a God. But the way, when you get the book, the book is There Is No God, but the no is struck out, and A is right in front of, right over top of it.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the title.
Oh, you got it. Okay, good.
Yeah. It's a fascinating book.
I see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, but Todd, here's the gist of it. When Dr. Anthony Flew, who's a brilliant man, a lot smarter than I am, I'll tell you that. He was a brilliant man. He looked into the world religions and he discovered, without going to all of them right now, we don't have the time, that Christianity, intellectually, the Christian apologetics just stuck out like a sore thumb. It was just so far beyond the others. I mean, you take Siddhartha Gautama, for example, right? We could do all of them, but, he didn't claim to even want to start a religion. He was a philosopher, and he said he was a philosopher, and that's all. brilliant man and such. But it would be much later that his followers would make something out of him that he did not even intend, right? And we can look at Hinduism and so forth, look at Muhammad, and you see in all of the world religions, there is nothing and no one that even comes close, says Dr. Anthony Flew, to the person of Jesus Christ. And that's what I would challenge you with, Todd, is to look at this individual who, yes, he fulfilled over 60 prophecies from the Old Testament that predicted things like where he would be born, where he would be raised, and so much more. What tribe he would come from, relatively when, very close to when he would come, and then things about his nature, his life, how he lived, even to the strong hints or allusions to his resurrection, to the miracles he would perform, and then of course when he came, he did all of that and more. He raised the dead. He healed, and not just Christians, or those who saw him. Of course, there were no Christians when he was doing his. They were his early followers and such. But it wasn't just believers, but unbelievers and such. Historians who wrote about this man, whether it's Tacitus, Suetonius, Pliny the Younger, Josephus, Thallus the Samaritan, historian writing in 50-something AD. We've talked about this before, Si, on this broadcast. They all acknowledge that this man, even the Jews of the day, they acknowledged he did miracles, but they claimed he did it by the power of the devil, which is absurd because the devil can't perform miracles, and Jesus performed miracles. So you have all of this attestation to this person, Jesus Christ, the historical record. The fact that he raised the dead, fulfilled prophecy, prophesied himself, and one of his great prophecies was he would establish the church. And the church, here we are, 2,000 years later, and we still exist as one Lord, one faith, one baptism in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Yes, we had, the Orthodox who split away and the Protestants, and that's unfortunate. We're working on that right side to bring them back. But the point is, when you look at this person of Jesus Christ, he is extraordinary. There's no one like him. And the most extraordinary thing that he ever did was he proclaimed himself to be God, and in many different ways, and then raised himself from the dead. And he prophesied, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up again. And he did just that. And we could talk about that, as the Catechism of the Catholic Church says, and I agree wholeheartedly. For my Catholic listeners, that's section 643 in the Catechism, that the resurrection is the single most provable event in all of antiquity. It can be understood as nothing more than an historical fact when you see believers, unbelievers, who acknowledge what they saw. He appeared to over 500 people. And brother, I know I'm kind of going long on this, but the bottom line is all of what we're talking about revolves around the fact that God wanted to establish a personal relationship with each and every one of us, and that includes you, Todd. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, says John 3:16, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. And he came unto his own, Scripture says. His own didn't receive him, but all who received him, this is John chapter 1, verse 12, to them he gave power to become sons of God, to be incorporated into his very divine life, right? Become members of his body. That's the way St. Paul describes it. Empowered to experience the divine life that he had in our very lives. And that, my friend, is a personal relationship. And I know it sounds, oh my gosh, this is outrageous. We can have a relationship with God. Absolutely. That's the reason why he came, to deal with our sin and so that we can be incorporated into the divine life and experience a personal relationship with him in a way, my friend, that even the ancient Jews could never have fathomed until he actually came. It's hinted at in the Old Testament, but we're talking what Jesus actually established in fulfillment of prophecy, took it beyond anything even the ancient people could have imagined. And it's all about a personal relationship with God through Jesus Christ.
Todd, I want to send you a book that we have if you'd like it. It's just it's called Answering Atheism. It's from our colleague Trent Horn. I'm very grateful that you got us started. You will understand that we invited people to call, and we've got to get to the rest of them as well. So I have to leave it there. But
Yes.
if you'd like the Answering Atheism book, just give us an address. We'll send the book off to you, and maybe we'll talk again. I hope that we will talk again. I'm going to go next to Madison, Wisconsin, where Sam is watching on YouTube. Welcome, Sam.
Yes.
Sam, why aren't you a Christian?
I would categorize myself as an agnostic who really, a couple years ago, really started to want to believe in Christianity.
Okay.
And so I started just kind of reading apologetics nonstop and watching all these debates. I was looking up something about Trent Horn earlier, and then somebody commented about Tim Staples, and I was like, I haven't heard of Tim Staples. So I searched him, and this was the first thing that popped up.
Wow.
So I think for me, I can read things like the 5 Proofs of God by Ed Fesser and watch these kind of philosophical debates, and I always come away from it kind of thinking everybody has made a good point and not really knowing where to land.
Right.
But then when it comes to Christianity specifically,
Right.
and it comes to the historicity of the resurrection, I think it's in my head when I read all about it and I read kind of the apologetics and the more like secular scholars' takes on it, I always come away feeling like it's more likely that it was sort of legends that were created after the fact. And, I hear people talk about how much evidence there is for it, but I always come away more thinking that we have a lot of evidence about what a few people believed at a certain point in time.
Let's let
Sure.
Sam. I'm going to let Tim respond a little bit.
Yeah. I really appreciate what you're saying, because that was a lot. What you just said was a lot of what I was thinking in my teen years as well. I mean, come on, you're believing these few people. But Sam, when I did the investigative work on that many years ago, and I've read about a lot of people a lot smarter than I am who have done the investigative work as well, I think that we're not just talking about a few people here that came up with this just crazy idea, but we're talking about, the Blessed Virgin Mary, the mother of this person, Jesus Christ, the apostles, and St. Paul, the one, as he said, born out of due season, who was an antichrist. I mean, he was persecuting Christians and such, schooled in the school of Gamaliel in Israel, who hated Christians, wanted to literally kill Christians. And when we look at the stories of the 12 apostles themselves, or the 11 minus Judas, but we could include Judas as well, these were guys who walked with him, talked with him, knew him, believed in him, and then they were devastated by the fact that he was crucified. They lost hope. They literally, as Matthew 27:56 said, they all fled. Their hopes were crushed, right? So you have the 12 apostles, if we include the later Matthias, and St. Paul. These were people who did not believe. That the 11 were just devastated and such because he was gone. He died, and they fled. They didn't know what in the world to do. But it was the resurrection. It was what they saw. And St. Paul, the enemy of Christianity, it was what they saw that changed their lives. And these guys went from being absolutely disillusioned, fleeing for their lives, Peter denying him 3 times, to all of them willing to die. And in fact, 11 out of the 12 apostles were martyred for the faith. They went to their deaths. You know, if these guys concocted a story, you can't get 3 or 4 people to hold a story straight for very long. But when the rubber meets the road and it's crucifixion time, or arrows being driven through your body, or being tortured to death, there's, folks will usually have some would say a come to Jesus moment, in the sense
Come
of
away
saying,
from Jesus
a come
moment in
away
this
from
case.
Jesus
Yeah.
moment. So the point being that the evidence is quite extraordinary just on that level, looking at those who encountered Jesus, then lost faith in him. What was it that transformed them into becoming all martyrs? Was this a lie? People just don't do that for a lie. Did they know that Jesus was phony and they concocted a lie? That just doesn't seem to fit the scenario, right? And then beyond that, you have the testimonies of the miracles that occurred, the healings, the supernatural component, both in Jesus' life and in the apostles. And for me, brother, 2,000 years, one of the most powerful things, Cy Kellett, Jesus said was in Mark chapter 16, in verse 17, Jesus said, "These signs shall follow them that believe. They will lay hands on the sick and they will recover," and so forth. And for 2,000 years, I challenge all of my atheist friends, agnostic friends, take a look. Be skeptical, but take a look at the testimony of the miracles that have happened for 2,000 years in the church. Just the canonizations. We've had thousands of them. And each one of them have documented miracles, Cy Kellett. These are all registered. We have miracles like in Lourdes. I've been there. I've gone to Lourdes, France, and done a little investigative work. I was able to sit down with the fellow who is the director of the International Medical Bureau of Lourdes. His name is Dr. Franciscus. And we have documented there thousands of miracles, but 72 in particular that are of extraordinary. I mean, we're talking about, and I've seen the pictures, my friend, of 2 of my favorites. It was August 21st and August 22nd of 1892. You had 2, they were both named Marie, but from different areas of France, who came, and they were both dying of the same disease of tuberculosis. And they were in the final stages back when there was no cure or no help for them. And the one, her name was Marie Lemarchand, and the other, Marie Lebranchu. One, Marie Lebranchu, had wasted away down to about 65 pounds, and she was on death's door. Marie Lebranchu, similarly, was dying, and she was so emaciated she had holes. And I saw the photo of a hole in her face from the TB, literally eating her skin from the inside out. And they say those who testified, and there were many, including one atheist who testified to seeing, there was a stench because of the rot of her skin. And both of these women on successive days were placed into the waters of Lourdes and healed instantaneous. And when you see the photo of Marie Lemarchand, I noted, even though it's grainy, it's 1892, you can see the mark where her skin, Those who testified said her skin was of a pinkish hue and like a baby's skin where it was healed. And Marie Lebranchu was healed instantaneously as well. She was 35 years old, lived a long life. Marie Lebranchu was 18 years old. She lived a long life, had something like 8 or 9 children, and she was on death's door. So I'm sorry for taking so much time on this, but what I challenge folks to do is to take a look at this from a wider perspective. You look at, yes, the testimonies of the apostles, the transformations of lives, the miracles, the fulfillment of prophecies, the prophecies of Jesus himself and such. But look at what happened after Jesus and the establishment of the church. I argue that the Roman Catholic Church is a miracle in and of itself. The fact that we've existed for 2,000 years, as we have, with one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and the fact that we have miracles such as the ones I've showed you. I'm not talking about folks on television saying, oh, my elbow was sore and now I'm healed, and there's no real physical evidence. But we're talking physical evidence of miracles that also demonstrate, as Jesus himself said in John chapter 10, verse 30, when he declared himself to be God, he said, I and the Father are one. And of course, the people there thinking he's crazy. He says, look, I know you're having a hard time believing that I'm God, but he says in verse 37 and 38, if you can't believe my words, believe for the sake of the works. Have you seen anybody raise the dead lately? Have you seen anybody open the eyes of the blind as you have seen me do? Well, that we have in the church in every generation for 2,000 years. So the proof continues in the church.
I got to take a break. I would like to send you a book, and if you would like it, Sam, as I said, there's other folks on the line. We invited them here, so I do want to get to them. Otherwise, let Tim. I'd come back to you otherwise. But if you'd like the book, Why We're Catholic, I'll send it to you. Just give us an address, and we'll send it off. And I hope that we will talk again. Sam, thank you for taking us up on our invitation. It was very gracious of you. We'll be right back with more Why Aren't You Christian on
Amen.
Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
I hope I didn't go too long. What do you think? I mean, you got to answer it.
What's that?
I said, I'm just hoping I'm not going too long.
I don't know. We got two more calls to get to, and one of them is not really on topic. So I would say finish the hour with this next caller, Amy, if you want.
Okay.
I mean, you're going to finish the hour anyway. So,
Yeah.
But if the music starts playing, tell her to stay on the line for a book.
Okay. It's always so hard. It's so hard I don't want to go too long, but I also don't want them leaving without
an answer.
Yeah, without a
especially
good
because we
answer.
invited them here. I think you do have to take more time on that.
Yeah.
Oh, we're back.
Okay. This is fun, dude. Catholic, but has a cousin who converted Islam too.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. We really are grateful to those who have called and wanted to take time, the appropriate amount of time with each call, because we said today, call if you are not Christian and tell us why you're not Christian. And if we've invited people to do that, and they have been gracious enough to call a Christian radio show, and we should take our time with them. And I hope we'll have some good time to talk with Amy in Chester, Virginia, watching on YouTube. Amy, welcome. Why aren't you a Christian?
Hello, Amy.
I'm a new Christian.
Oh, you are? Okay. Tell us about that.
I was an atheist for like 15 years, and
Wow.
my conversion is dramatic, but I still have trouble grasping
Yes.
why God cares about like each individual's life circumstance or each individual.
Yes.
But for me, it's like caring about every little grain of sand on the beach, right? Why
That's
do
right.
you care about like the intrinsic like little details about
Yes.
like a drop of sand,
Yes.
So that's still like trouble.
Yeah.
For me, like grass.
Well, Amy, you are not alone. There are millions of people who have huge trouble with that. But I think, Amy, the way we can grasp what is ultimately a mystery, because God is so infinitely beyond us, but really it's because of the fact that God is infinite being. He's absolute being. There's no imperfection in him. There's no lack in him. He is the uncaused cause, right? As St. Thomas says, the unmoved mover. He is absolute and infinite perfection and infinite being. There's a sense in which we can reasonably say that there's nothing that he can't not know about the created order that he himself created. It would be metaphysically impossible for God not to know each grain of sand on the beach, right? Because of the fact that he is infinite being. And the beautiful thing, Amy, about our faith is that Jesus is the demonstration of the love of God. When you look at Jesus and the fact that he knew, as what is it in Matthew chapter 2, I think it's verse 24 and 25, where it's, no, not Matthew, I think that's John's gospel. But the scripture says that Jesus did not need anyone to testify to him about what was in man. Why? Because he knew all men. When Jesus walked up to you in the streets of Jerusalem and he looked at you, or when he walked up to the Samaritan woman at the well, he knew everything that she was thinking. Remember, after he tells her about her 5 husbands, yeah, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with now is not your husband. She was shocked. And after that encounter with Jesus, she went and exclaimed to all the Samaritans, he said, "Come and meet the man who told me everything about me." Mm-hmm. Right? So Jesus, even though he was the God-man, he was incarnate, he was a man walking around, he was also fully God. And he showed us a bit about how, yes, God knows what's in each one of us. He knows the fallen sparrow, as Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. He knows everything about everything in the entire universe. Yes. Why? Because he is infinite being. It would be impossible. In fact, Amy, if there was something God didn't know, right? If he didn't know about that 1 grain of sand over there, he wouldn't be God, because he would have a lack of some knowledge, and that would mean there's some lack in his being. And therefore, we would have to look for somebody else, because that's not God. So on one level, Amy, even though God is mysterious in his nature, we cannot fully comprehend him. Even 1 billion trillion years in heaven, we can see the reasonableness. And we can understand that, yes, God does know every person, everything in the entire universe, because he is God. And as a result of that, you can rest assured, Amy, that your life is in good hands when you place your life into the hands of our blessed Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, because he is both the God who created the universe and the man who walked this earth, suffered and died for your sins. That is the definition of good news, Amy.
Amy, I want to send you a copy of the book, Why We're Catholic. If you'd like it, just hang on the line and give us an address where we can send that. And I hope we'll get to talk with you again. I'm very, very grateful to our callers. One caller we did not get to. I apologize for that. But what a great thing to call and let us talk about the Christian faith with you. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.